Hi, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Leslyn. Thanks for stopping in. Hello. Listen, if you guys are new to me, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am all about positivity. I hope that you'll take a minute and go through my channel and go through my content because my goal always here is to support, encourage, and promote personal growth and awareness. Um, and Lily, that's what they say. They say vision boards help manifestation. Um, so, yes, I mean, that's the whole point. If you want a really good book about that, about manifestation in general, you should read The Secret. Andrea, and you, are you going to be okay? I don't know. I'm not a psychic. I'm a therapist, and they are very different disciplines. But I would say that if you want to be okay, you can be okay. You know, somebody asked me the other day what I attributed my success to from my surgery, and I said obviously, I think my body was in pretty good shape before the surgery. I have a very strong positive mental attitude, and I believed that I was going to do well. I did. I think part of it, honestly, was just that I believed I could. And so I was going to say I laid in bed every night and I allowed, basically, it was a meditation where I allow the universe's light in and I push all of the pain and suffering out. And I kind of have that practice when I feel the uglies. Do you know what I mean by feeling the uglies? When I feel heavy emotions or I feel physical stuff or I just feel overwhelmed from clients, maybe I just lie in bed at night that night and just kind of imagine that I'm refueling with the positive vibes from the universe, and as I fill that up, I'm dispersing or displacing the negative energy. And I think that attitude in general is just super, super powerful. So if you feel yourself struggling with negative energy, I want to really encourage you to have some just alone time where you're consciously and intentionally moving that negative energy away from you. Um, yeah, I think that's super important. And I'm a little curious. Um, and I don't know, I very, very, very rarely talk about religion in this forum. But she was telling me that she was super excited because she was having a group of people over at her house talking about, now I have to get the word right, um, predetermination. And she was really excited. And I said, well, what is predetermination? Because I don't have any recollection of hearing that phrase. And she said, it's the fact that God has predetermined who's going to get into heaven and who's going to get into hell. And apparently I said, you've got to be kidding me. To which she did not take that nicely. And I'm sure I said it with a lot of attitude because it came out very quickly. And I didn't mean to be disrespectful. That wasn't my goal. But I think that's how she heard it. And I am very curious to try to understand from anybody who's actually listening that maybe believes in predetermination, how that even makes sense as a Christian. I looked it up, and that's exactly what it means, and I'm flabbergasted. I grew up Catholic. I spent a lot of time in the Lutheran Church. I've been to hours upon hours of Bible study in my time, and eventually grew very far away from organized religions, although I feel that I have an incredibly strong faith. But it absolutely blows my mind. I don't understand what the motivation is to be good if there's a chance, or to be Christ-like, or to act in love, if you believe that somehow God has already determined that you're going to heaven or hell. I mean, frankly, I don't even believe in heaven and hell. But those are the kinds of things that blow my mind. And I was just curious if anybody who listens to me has a different answer, or has, I mean, I'm open to hearing people's thoughts on this. I don't think my thoughts are going to change, but I think I'm really looking for maybe some other input, so that if I ever run into this with a client, I don't have that kind of reaction, because I would hate for a client to feel judged right away, because I had a reaction. And I guess with my best friend, I definitely did not temper my reaction to what she said. So, Floyd, I'm so sorry. A burden. You are not a burden. I mean, obviously I don't know you, but I don't believe that people are burdens. I just don't believe that. I truly, truly believe that there's a point to every single human existence. And while I totally believe that you feel that way, you have to remember that sometimes our feelings, a brain disease. You have to remember that sometimes a feeling doesn't represent the truth. You have a brain disease, okay, and you feel that you're a burden. I can imagine. Now, this is not in any way, shape, or form a comparison, but I just had a hip replacement, and for 10 days, I had to have somebody lift my legs into bed. And so I understand minusculely that when you're dependent on someone, you can feel like you're a burden. But I hope that you can hear that the people who love you and the people who help you do that because they want to be there. And that all of you are perfectly positioned, and I know this sounds weird to say, but I believe that all of you are perfectly positioned to grow as a result of having that experience. Now, I can imagine that that might be hard to hear, but I personally believe that, and I've had a lot of really, really shitty stuff happen in my life. And even in the middle of all of that shitty stuff, what I believed beyond a shadow of a doubt is that there was some value in the experience. So, I know that there are people who say that's bullshit, and I can totally understand. I probably, if I'd been at a different point in time in my life, I maybe would have said that. It's just that I kind of believed very early very early in my life, that that's kind of the way the world worked. And because I believed that, when I had catastrophic things happen in my life, I felt the pain, and I grieved, and I, was angry, and I did all of the kind of normal human things. I felt all of the emotions, but I also truly believed that there would be some value to having that experience, whether it was mine or my caregiver or my children or somewhere along the line. And so I don't know what you're experiencing, obviously, but I hope I can offer some hope that every single human soul has value. And while it might be hard to see, if you can learn to trust that that value is inherent, it might make life just a little bit more tolerable. Void, I just want to suggest to you that you came into this live and you just made that comment, and then I responded the way I did. And there was potentially somebody else in this live tonight that needed to hear what I said to you. And that very idea means that you were a facilitator for my response, which maybe really helped somebody else. And I want you to know that that has value, right? Like, we just never, ever, ever know how what we say, what we do, where we stand. We don't even know how we may be positively impacting someone in our world. But I truly believe that if you just allow yourself to trust that your value is inherent from the moment you are brought into existence. Void, thank you. I just need to say this one thing before I go back to what my thought was. You will never know how much value there is in every single day. You know, there's so many stories. There are so many stories of people who grew amazing strength because they were caregivers. There were people who, I mean, I'm personally a believer that some souls are facilitators, period. Like, the way that I make sense out of an infant's death is I believe that an infant is a facilitator, or maybe that Sid's baby was a facilitator for some healing or growing that the mom needed to do. And I don't mean to be triggering if there's anybody listening, but I think, you know, I was widowed when I was very young. My husband was 23 years old, and there was an accident, and he passed away and left me as a single mom. And for years I asked myself, like, why did this happen? Why me? And I can tell you 100 reasons today how that experience benefited me. And so for that reason, and that reason alone, if we can remember to allow nature to run its course, there's a reason, I believe. So you hang in there. And we should always tell others about the micro joys. Seriously. I mean, even, I don't remember now what I was going to say about this, but I was thinking about that the other day, Julie, and I thought that even like the checkout person, right? The cashier at the grocery store, just somebody saying, "Hey, how are you?" You know, just this positive vibe train that came in tonight. How sweet was that? You know, it's a microsecond of time, and you just have no idea how that could positively shift somebody's energy. So I want to encourage all of you tomorrow, if it's already late where you are, tomorrow, make an effort to just tell somebody. Yeah, it's one of the suggestions in my book. I had somebody buy 12 books the other day, which I thought was super fun. And in our conversation, because she said, "Hey, look, I did this," I pulled it up. I pulled out the book I had it on my desk, and I'm a big believer. And I say this in the book, that it's the kind of book that you just open and that's the message for you right there, right? And one of the things is, take the time to tell the people you run into today that their smile matters to you, or that their good service mattered to you, or that the fact that they were even willing to be where they were mattered to you. A little bit like, thank you for your service, right? Just this idea that the fact that you're there doing that, just makes a difference. I always tell people who drop off my Instacart order or my DoorDash orders, thank you, I appreciate you. And I always try to give them a decent tip too, because that shows it. You're going to call out sick, but I think I'll just go in knowing I could be that for someone. Yes, into the waves. For some reason, just that comment generates so much emotion. Because, sorry, Caitlin. Because that's it. That's exactly it. Like, we just get up and we go where we're supposed to be, and we take our best self there when we can, right? I'm not saying I'm always my best self, but we take our best self there and we show up and we're present for the people that show up in front of us. Yes. I have a client who is a pastor, and yes, it does. Let's see. Some service people work the hardest and need to be told they're appreciated. Absolutely. See there? Good, Amy. That's nice. And those matter too. So anyway, I have a client who's a pastor, and in a comment with him once, we were talking about how challenging it can be when you're in one of these professions where people think you have your shit together. Whether you're a pastor or a therapist or a psychiatrist or a doctor or whatever, people, we tend to have expectations of certain people and think and make the assumption that they've got it figured out. And I think I shared with you on Monday that I'd gotten a case of shoot, now I can't see. You guys, I do get tired by this. Or teachers, yes. What did I call it? Petties. I got a case of the petties. I mean, and we're all just human beings. So I have a notebook. It's just a spiral notebook, and I call it the uglies. And it's where I put my uglies. And I will sit down with the notebook and I will write out all the foul, ugly, spiteful, hurtful things that I am feeling, so that they don't get dumped where they don't belong. And then like I said, I came out and I said to my daughter, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so petty, and I don't like that I'm feeling petty. So I knew the minute I said that, I knew that I needed to go back to the uglies and just journal that for a minute, right? Just journal, I don't like knowing that I have the uglies, but it's okay, or that I'm feeling petty, and something along the lines of, but I do acknowledge that I'm just a human being who has this pain that keeps getting kind of triggered by these events, and I'm just going to let myself have some grace. And it's that simple. It really is that simple. I'm just going to offer myself some grace. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to say, it's okay. Of course, this would not feel good. Just don't puke on somebody else. But I think, so I shared that technique with this pastor, and he came back to me and he said it's probably one of the most fun things that he does. And he said, I thought maybe I should check in and find out whether it was okay if I was having fun doing this. And I'm like, why not? There's probably a lot of the uglies that you haven't felt free to express that need to come out. And I suspect the fun might be that, as you dump this stuff off, you're finding yourself floating or being lighter. And I think that might be the fun part, right? As that you feel yourself kind of coming to the surface and you're not as heavy. And I think that would probably be fun. Are the levels of narcissism requested to be higher in the pastor population? That's a good question. I was actually thinking, I think some, right? I mean, we can't deny that there are some very narcissistic, popular people that call themselves pastors. And I think the question is the humility, right? In my thoughts, I don't know if this was this morning. I really am losing I'm losing track of time so much. I think that people who are faithful like that, I think that being called is a colloquialism that's part of the faith language, more so than it is a narcissistic trend. The pastor that I've been working with, he's incredibly humble. And I think he really, truly does believe that he was called to preach. And he's, it's interesting because sometimes I sit back and I'm like, I mean, you're the pastor, but let me just kind of share some perspective on that. And every once in a while, he'll send me an email and says, by the way, just want you to know I preached on our conversation the other day. And I'm like, yes, good. Yes, good, because what that means to me is that he took time to really dive into a topic maybe a little bit more deeply. And yeah, I guess I can't get much more detail, but it just, yeah. So, Julia, I think the question is, some pastors get caught in the greed trap. And I think that's what happens to narcissists, right? I think it was this morning when I was thinking about this. Because inevitably I start thinking about my ex-husband. And this key element of narcissism about the persona, that you can't jeopardize the persona. One of the things that I think really sets my client apart from someone who's narcissistic is that he's incredibly vulnerable. Like, he is willing to talk and share and let people see the raw side of him when he's not emotionally attached. And I think that's pretty normal, right? So, but if I think of like Jim and Tammy Baker, which I know are super old names, I mean, there's a classic example of narcissism at work also, right? There were, especially Tammy Faye Baker, such overt concern about how we are perceived. And I didn't know them personally, so it's very unfair of me to make that judgment. So just saying, I will I will just put it out there. I didn't know them personally, and so that's a completely unfair judgment. Although I did follow their case pretty closely because back in the day, they were like Joel Osteen's, right? They were very big preachers. And and I think that when their story, when their personas came crashing down, there was a lot of publicity. There were lots of magazine articles. There were lots of that, and I think that I mean, personally, if you want to get kind of spiritual about it, I believe that the devil is the ego and the apple represents greed. And that the devil is constantly trying to, and I hate even using that term because I don't believe in the devil, but I think the temptation of human beings is always satisfying the ego. I think the ultimate goal of existence is finding an appropriate balance in denying the ego, right? Everybody has an ego, and I'm kind of talking about the Freudian ego, but I think that okay, fine. In the ways I want to make it really clear, I did not know them personally, so. And it's been a number of years since I've followed up with them or about in anything about them. So total caveat that I have very limited, anything I say is going to be something that's more hearsay than it is anything else from the media. So thank you for bringing that up, because I would love to know that that's really true. I think that's growth. But anyway, I think that's what we're, hello baking. I think that's what we're called to do, is to, as souls, is to grow our spirit, and the spirit is constantly tempted, right? But I don't believe in devils and hell. I believe I have much more of that psychological space and that mind, body, soul space, that they're always at work. And I think that, all these different disciplines hit at parts of that. It's one of the reasons that, in the last 30 some odd years, I've read hundreds of books from all kinds of different disciplines, because I wanted a well-rounded picture of what people would say. So I would read books written by theologians. I would read books by Buddhists. I would read books by psychologists. I would read books by secular people, non-secular people, and yes, and astrology and numerology. I mean, can I tell you that I see 1010 and 111 and 444 almost daily? I can't even begin to tell you how frequent those numbers are in my psyche. I love the pattern app. I didn't say that right. Pattern app. So, but my point is that I've read so much about all of those things, and when you do that, what I've come to understand is that they all hit on certain parts. In my church days, I went through the Bible 2 different times in Bible studies. I went through it as a kid. We went through the what was that new Bible called in the 70s, like the late mid 70s? It was the new Bible, maybe. And Into the Waves, just Google angel number 444 and you'll find all kinds of information about that. Anyway, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I did that as a teenager in like a youth group. And then twice more I went through the Bible. And then I read books that disputed the Bible. And I read books like The Secret. And I read a lot of New Agey and parapsychology stuff. And so the end result is, I believe I have a very eclectic belief system that's not oriented in one space. Because I don't really believe that any one of those spaces got it all figured out. Not that I do, but it just seemed like everywhere you went, there was a piece missing, or piece or two, and then this thing would kind of answer one of these pieces, but it would leave these pieces out. And they didn't all fit together nice and neatly, so it's still just kind of like, yeah, and they all intersect. You know, I've talked to a lot of people who have experiences or memories of past lives, who see ghosts, who are gifted in being able to speak and have information about other people, like mediumship and psychics. How does that happen? Right? I mean, and if you allow yourself to be exposed to that, it feels like trickery, right? Because it's unknown. One of the things I said to this pastor once, what was the analogy? He said, I just want to know, because something had happened and he wanted to know why. And he said, I'm so uncomfortable not knowing why. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You seem to be really comfortable believing in God, but you don't know, you can't see him or touch him or hear him. And you seem to be really comfortable even though there's nothing there. And so when you find yourself not understanding this, when there's nothing here to explain, just trust the way you trust in God. It's the same thing. It's just a different scenario, right? I love that. Maybe the space is the leap of faith that is needed to behave or to believe. Yes. Yes, why wouldn't it be? It's a different level of consciousness. We all have it. I totally agree. So anyway, I find it all fascinating. And if it's a different level of consciousness, yes. Ooh, the universe has your back. Are you a Gabby Bernstein fan? Yeah, just trust. You know, I mean, there's so many cool books. Gabby Bernstein, right? She's considered a New Age thought leader today. Then there's the Purpose-Driven Life. There's Seed of the Soul, Gary Zukov. There's there's just so many. There's Eckhart Tolle. There's Deepak Chopra. There's Pema Chodron. There's so many people. If you want to expand your knowledge. There are so many people that you can read and grow. I don't know. I just love that stuff. I love doing it. Yeah, The Shack. Yes, it's a movie on Netflix. Oh, I do remember seeing it. It is very emotional. You know, back in the day, it was Jonathan Livingston Seagull, right? Um, Joshua. I'm pretty sure Joshua was another. He was a carpenter in Denver, right? Um, you guys, there's so my frustration, especially with people like my friend, is that they choose one point of view and they never deviate from it. And baking, if you go to my website, This is Leslyn, it's in my profile, ThisIsLeslyn.com, and you go to the tabs under resources, there's a recommended reading list. And many of the books that I just talked about are there. I do need to update it. It's on my to-do list, but I think there's probably 15 books there, and that's at least enough to get you started. But I do have a recommended reading list on my website. So, and you can probably even put in This is Leslyn recommended reading into Google and come right to it. So, yes. Um, yeah, speaking. And it's just very sad to me that people pigeonhole themselves into one point of view, because nothing is black and white like that. And I don't mean any disrespect to people who have a very strong faith. I have a very strong faith. But build your faith by and confirm your faith by walking all the way around it. You know, and that's so, so important. Fear equates to control, and questioning fear questions are absolute. Fear equates to control, and questioning fear questions are absolute. You know what's interesting? Fear fosters the need to control, right? Because fear represents uncertainty, and uncertainty is scary. And what's the way to create certainty? Control. So I totally agree that fear fosters the need to control. And when anybody questions the things that create certainty, it opens the door again to that fear, because it challenges the certainty, right? Tony Robbins talks a lot about certainty and uncertainty, and how most of us are driven to create certainty in our lives, that very few people really get comfortable with uncertainty. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I would tell you that every person I see that is struggling with anxiety is really struggling with uncertainty. Because remember, anxiety is fear. Anxiety is the consequence of fear. And uncertainty, if you're not comfortable with it, is going to produce fear, and hence produce anxiety. And so I think that it's one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is to lean into uncertainty. And you can do that when you trust the universe. I've been thinking a lot. So one of the things I've had to do is learn how to get all of my weight, and there's a lot of it, onto my new hip, right? And what's really weird is that I can feel, not painful in any way, it's just a weird sensation. I can feel what I'm assuming is the post in my leg bone. And so it's a weird sensation that I'll just get used to, I'm sure. But in the meantime, my bad hip, the new hip now, used to be a bad hip. And because it was bone on bone, for 5 years, I compensated by using my right hip more, right? My habit is to lean to the right. It's to protect my left side. And so all of my muscles, all of my tendons have an automatic kind of, every time I go to put weight on my left side, there's this automatic tendency to shift the weight and throw my hip to the right. So it's making walking without the cane a little bit more challenging because I have to be incredibly intentional. I can do it, right? I can, but I have to be super intentional and literally tell my muscles what they have to do. It's like I have to tell myself to keep my hips straight. So here's what's interesting. I used that analogy with a couple who was working on their relationship. And for years, they had this pattern of reactive behavior. And now that they've been in therapy for a while and they've learned these tools and they're developing vulnerability and they're building their friendship, they have what it takes. They have the new equipment, but they are having to intentionally use that equipment for their relationship. Because if they just allow themselves to kind of do what they've always done, they're naturally turning their backs to each other because that's what they had to do to protect themselves. And I just thought it was a pretty interesting comparison. Exactly what's happening with me physically with my hip. We do the same thing emotionally. Our bodies are amazing, right? Our brains are amazing. They go into natural protective mode. And when you're healed, when you're healing something, you have to retrain even your brain that it's okay because you've been doing the work and you've healed. Just keep that in mind. Have a great weekend, and I will see you guys on Monday night.